time? It says live. Alright, I think we're live this time. Maybe I missed the button before. Let's see if it shows up on my YouTube. There it goes. Here it comes. There we go. We are live. Because it says live right there, green, big live on my screen. Oh, let's get over here and see. Ryan, dig here. Ryan, you're live. Glad Ryan's here. Hello, Ryan. I can't type without looking. Hello, Ryan. Alright, let's see, not top chat. Let's get over here and say, just give me all my live chat. How about that? Give me all my live chat. Oh, look, he did an icon thingy. What is that, like a purple screamy face? That's pretty cool. At least you did it. I don't think Robert ever gets his to work. So, that's because Robert never works either. So, some, like they say, housekeeping rules, housekeeping items. If you're watching it live, thank you very much. Jump in on the chat. And Ryan did another one, a big old face. What was it? Oh, jump in on the chat, because that way I'll know that you're here and that you're watching. I got so many little doodads to look at. I don't know how to tell how many participants there are. Really, unless you get in on the chat and say something. Analytics, edit video. We can't do any of that stuff. What happened to my live chat? Learn more. There used to be a place I knew when I could find it about the participants. But anyway. Oh, it's up here. There it is. It's in the OBS software. So it's just, I know I say this every time, but is that the participants in the stream or is that just the participants in the chat? I'm thinking it's in the chat because it's in the chat window. So I'll go back to my original thing. If you're watching this live, say something in the chat so I'll know you're here. Even if it's just like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or 1, 2, 3, 4 or something. Anyway, if you're not watching it live, you're watching it on YouTube later, leave me a comment, please. Like, subscribe to the channel. I checked my subscribers the other day. I'm like to 66. That's really good because it goes up, well, 1 or 2 every week maybe. So, it's climbing. The good thing about subscribers is if they watch. And if they watch, then they should leave a comment. And tell me what I could do better, do worse, do less of, more of. Give me ideas for videos. So I'd also like to say, if you're live, now don't do this if you're watching it on YouTube, but if you're watching live and you get a hankering, you can, where is it? I wish I could do this. Call this number right here, and I'll try to answer it. See this little number right here? I hope I did that right. I'll try to answer it. Or if you want to come on live with the video, send you an invitation, you can come on live. So I'm going to have, and I don't know. See, if you're on chat, then you can answer this question. Or if you watch it later on YouTube, you can answer it. Maybe I'll see it. Do you like your apple cider warm or cold? Does that bother you when you do that? Does that bother you when everybody does that? Or you be sitting, eating, and somebody, soup, coffee, whatever it might be, slurps it. I think that would bother me. Clell says howdy. Ryan likes his apple cider warm. That's the way that is. I found some in the refrigerator that's still good. It's not fermented yet, so I thought I'd have some. And I thought, you know what? It's supposed to be winter out there, so I'll get it warm. Then you know what I said? I said, you know what would be good in this warm apple cider? A little honey. I'll put a little honey in there. So next thing you know, I'll have marshmallows and cinnamon sticks and all kinds of junk floating around in there. So, but anyway, that's what happens. I do that with my ice cream. I can't just eat plain ice cream. I got this thing about ice cream. I like to put chocolate syrup, not, I guess it could be the Hershey's, but you buy the big bottle of squeezed chocolate syrup for ice cream, and I put that on there. And if I got caramel syrup squeeze, I'll put that on there. If I've got the trail mix with the M&Ms in it, I'll put that on there. If I've got trail mix without M&Ms, I can put that on there. So my ice cream turns out like a salad. Like, you know, you put a bed of lettuce. Well, I put a bed of ice cream. And then I go through the refrigerator and, ooh, walnuts. Ooh, granola. Ooh. I'll go through the pantry. Next thing you know, I got a bed of ice cream with just all this other stuff on top of it. And it's crunchy, and it's good, and it's wonderful. And then I have gas all night because I think I'm lactose intolerant. Anyway, tonight's topic for the Minutes with Mylo show is kind of a follow-up on, I guess, the metal detecting portion of the hobbyist series. And that has to deal with you going out and looking and finding for things. And typically, you know, there are things that you can find just on top of the grass metal detecting. You can pick them up with your fingers. But most of the time, it involves digging a shallow hole. Ice cream sounds pretty good almost all the time, but I don't eat a lot of ice cream. I don't know. I just don't. I don't eat a lot of. Now, over the holidays, if you if you worked with us, you'd say this is a lie, but I don't eat a lot of cakes and cookies and those kind of things. You sit them in front of me and they're free, then okay. I'll eat my weight in cookies, and I'll even eat. Nobody got me one, and I think I'd eat it because I've eaten them before. Are those little what are they, the fruit cakes? The little things that come in the brick size, and they've got like chewy cherries in them and chopped up walnuts. What are those things called? I think they have a special one. It's not like a, what are they called? Somebody in the chat. Come on, Phil, I know you love them. I bet you just love them. But I'd eat one. I mean, people always make fun of them on TV or whatever about regifting them or getting them away or like it's some kind of bad thing. I think it is fruitcake, isn't it? So anyway, where was I? Ice cream. I got, yeah, okay, fruitcake. Ryan distracted me with his ice cream would be good right now. And I don't need a bunch of ice cream, blah, 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 blah. So, back to it. Metal detecting, digging, finding things. Call them treasures. Most of the time it's just garbage junk. Okay? Garbage junk is what you find. Don't matter where you go, you're digging, you're going to find garbage junk. Okay? So, we talked about, never actually had fruitcake. Well, I don't know. Right now they ought to be ripe. I mean, you know, let's get one that we didn't nobody bought for Christmas. It's probably going to be good and ripe by now, like an old banana. And so maybe we ought to try to find us one and eat it. Yeah, that's just I don't know why people don't like them. They seem like they're good stuff. You know, it'd be good on fruitcake would be ice cream. If you're going to have fruitcake and ice cream, then you really have some chocolate syrup on it. And then, you know, let me tell another little story. Back when the Bristol Mall was the sizzle place, and you went there, and it had all the stores in it, Upstairs, Baskin Robbins, I think it was. Maybe it wasn't Baskin Robbins at the time, but anyway, upstairs, ice cream parlor, a daggone banana split that come in the little boat. Oh my gosh. And that's where I get my ideas for ice cream. What should be on ice cream is from banana splits. You know, you got the banana, you got the red, the white, and the black ice cream. You got the walnut sprinkles. You got the cherry things. You got the chocolate syrup on it. And, oh my gosh. And then they come in a little plastic boat like deal. Man, oh man, I love those things. I love those things. Anyway, so you dig up treasures, call them treasures. I showed you what I got mostly. Matchbox cars, the cell phone, flip phone thing I got was right next to the basketball court, covered up in a bunch of grass. So, I mean, you know, that wasn't even, my metal detector just went nutsy cuckoo and I reached in there and flipped the grass around and there it was. But, I mean, you know, you're not digging stuff. And I alluded to this in that conversation where everybody thinks you're raping society of its archaeological finds and oh my goodness. But anyway, so that led me to a little discussion with my significant other who happens to be a follower of like shipwrecks. And anyway, so I'm just going to use the Titanic as an example because everybody knows that. So now, it was owned by a company. It was sunk unintentionally. It laid wherever for however many years, and somebody went looking for it. And they found it. All right, now take away the fact that the dude was rich. All right, and then he made a movie and got even richer off this thing, off the Titanic. And he had the money to spend to go. But there's the thing. Take away the movie. Let's just say there was a guy that was eat up with the Titanic and he got financial backing to go and find it. And he goes and he finds it. And he spends millions of dollars to go down there to it. Okay? He's the only one, right? He's the only guy that's even, you know, well, I won't say the only one, but a handful of people have probably tried to find it to figure out where it's at. But he's the one that does it. He's the one that spends the money. He's the one that goes down in these deep remote operated vehicles and reaches out with the little pinchers and touches a ship that hasn't been seen in 100 years, however long it's been. Okay? So he reaches out with these little pinchers. He reaches down, he pulls off a rivet off the Titanic, pops it into a bucket, pulls another one up, pops it into the bucket. All this is on video. He goes to the top. He's got 2 rivets. Who gets the rivets? Okay? Who owns the rivets? Should he be able to sell the rivets and make some of his money back? Should he be able to just put them in his own private collection and wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go downstairs or roll over in bed, however he does it, and look at these rivets? You know, should be able to put them on display in New York and let other people come by and look at the rivets. You know, so who owns it? And say he's done this. And then whoever owned or bought the White Line series, White Star series, you know, that's whoever had the Titanic. And it's went through, you know, 100 corporations since then. And they said, oh, those are my rivets. I want them, you know. They ought to be in a museum. He needs to donate them and put them in the museum. Well, he spent the millions and millions of dollars. Okay? So, that's where we started going with this thing. And I know it's different in the ocean. But it's not that much different. And I did a little research. And like so many other things, governments get involved. And it becomes a pissing contest of, well, that should be ours. Well, blah, 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 blah. With, you know, aunt twice removed, third time the charm, all that other stuff says, well, my great granddaddy owned that. And back in the 1600s, he sailed over on the Pinta Maria and the Santa Maria, and he ought to get all that. But just, I'm sorry, I was taken aback by the fruitcake. Quail loves fruitcake. Brian doesn't seems gross. And I think Clell's saying he has a fruitcake from 1978. It's still good. What's not to love? uh, how do you know it's still good? Did you eat part of a fruitcake from 1978? Golly, how could you? What were you like? 3 and 78 or something? I don't know. What? Who has a fruitcake from 1978? Surely you jest. You pulleth our leggeth. So, Clell says find her keepers. I mean, I can see both sides. Let's go back from sea, land, from the sea back to land, and talk about just the things that we would be doing. Metal detecting. Okay? So, you do it on your own property, there should be no question. Okay? You do it on your own property, and they actually have an abandoned ship law, believe it or not. And it's I think as I read it, it's 3 nautical miles off the coastline or navigatable, whatever, inner waterways and things. But according to what I read on ships, let's say off the coast of South Carolina, 2.85 nautical miles off the coast, an old French merchant ship is discovered with valuable artifacts. And I see, here's the deal. It doesn't even have to be valuable artifacts. Just the fact that you found it and there's things still there, those are artifacts. Whether it's a sliver of wood or a gold doubloon, it's an artifact. Anyway, so what I understood is South Carolina would then have jurisdiction, ownership of that vessel. Now, if they could prove it's French, then the French are going to jump in on that. But man, there's international people that sit around and talk about this stuff. And we talked about it, I think it was at lunch today or something. But there's got to be thousands of ships since, commercial and private or tribal people took to the seas in boats that were ocean going worthy, that have sunk with some type of valuable cargo. And just the fact that they're old and sunk makes them valuable. So, there's got to be thousands out there. And so it just depends on where you read on as far as ships go. But some people say, well, it's not regulated enough, and other people say it's too regulated. Back and forth, back and forth. So, but on land, if you're a property owner in the United States, you get to keep it. Okay? Now, depending on what it is, I'm sure the government gets wind of it, and they're going to, if they want it, they're going to come and take it. I mean, if you're out there, somewhere and you're digging and you find, you know, buried aliens. If you watch that show, if you find buried aliens in the ship, they're gonna come and take it. You can't just do a weekend at Bernie's deal with a dead alien and tote him around in a convertible Cadillac, and the government not come along and say, "Oh, by the way, we're taking that dude," and there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm sure something would be had to say it if you found, you know, old Civil War gold that was hidden by the Confederates or, the northern side that was supposed to be come back later and it was going to pay for, horses and feed and all that stuff to make it through the winter, whatever it might be. And, some sergeant and his captain went out to bury it, and sergeant killed the captain and because he was going to come back and steal it all later, and then he caught the dead foot and died of gangrene, and never got back to it. Who knows? Ethics and morals, what's the right thing to do on lost and found? I say if it's declared lost, fair game for whoever has the money to find it. Yeah, and I looked this up. It's all considered archaeological, and they were talking about. Man, I could read this. What happened to that thing? Anyway, land treasure. Let's see, just real quick. Let me do this. Normally I read these things. Let's see if we can do this. We can do this. I'll turn that on. And we'll put that up. About right. No, come on. There we go. There we go. And then I take me. And I do this. Hold on now. I'm going to show you my artwork. Don't get impatient. I've got to fix it up first. Whoa. Hey now. Okay. So. And I know what everybody says. This is the all ever dreaded Wikipedia. Alright. So I'm going to put this on so I can actually read it. But this was Wikipedia treasure hunting, and it talked about the physical search for treasures, and most of this was talking about, maritime, right? How people found all these ships and blah, 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 and who were some of the actors or who were some of the people that were treasure hunters. Okay, then it talks about the legalities. In 1906, Secretaries of Interior and Agriculture Ward made an act for the preservation of American antiquities, ancient artifacts. Okay, so I guess you'd have to look up what they considered ancient and what are artifacts. So this basically says that every department of the government, if they have jurisdiction over a certain portion of land, then they are the ones that can make the rules up about how things are done. Okay? So if artifacts are on historical landmarks, monuments, let's see. These artifacts and locations are as follows: historic landmarks, historic monuments, objects of antiquity, objects of scientific value, and historical value. Okay? So that's the things that they regulate, which basically is anything. I mean, if you think about it, of an historical value, well, anything that, if that is like beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, historical value. If you find a penny or a half cent or a thin cent or whatever they would call them from the 1700s, is that historical value? There might be, thousands of those things floating around. So does that make the one you found of historical value? I would say no. But they could say it was, and then they, could take it. But these are mostly on federal land. So here's a tidbit for you. Don't ever go find anything on federal property. All right? And I found this out just as a sidebar. Let's see, ethics and morals. What's the right thing to do on what says it was declared? Okay. So I found this out. When you start talking about what the federal government's doing, what the U.S. government's doing, and what they can do on federally owned land. Did you know? This is crazy. Did you know that the federal government owns nearly 80% of Nevada? The state, okay, right down here, the government owns 79.6% of Nevada's 70,000 acres, or 70 million acres, I'm sorry. 70 million acres. The Bureau of Land Management controls almost all federal land. All right? They own 79% of Nevada, the whole state. How can it be a state if the federal government owns almost 80% of it? That just blows my mind. I started looking about, well, what's on federal land? And they control that, pretty tight. National forests, all that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, how much land does the federal government own? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Go back to the top. Federal government owns more than 27% of the land in the United States. I mean, that's everything. Everything that's considered a state, I guess, Hawaii. So, Puerto Rico's not a state, but I don't know if they count that in there. But anyway, the 48 lower states, Alaska and Hawaii. You put all of them together, and the United States government owns 20%, 27% of all the land that makes up the United States. Hey, Robert, what's up? Put your matchbook away. Not going to happen. So they do it. They set aside a wildlife refuge, national parks, Department of Defense. So they own 79% of Nevada. The government controls more than 50% of Utah, Idaho, Alaska, and Oregon. Okay, they own 63% of Utah, 61% of Idaho, 61% of Alaska, and 53% of Oregon. The Bureau of Land Management is the largest landholder. Okay. Apparently the federal government does not like Connecticut because they own less. They own 0.3% of Connecticut, 0.3% of Iowa, 0.5% of Kansas. Here's a shocker. They own 0.6% in New York State, New York State, and 7.7% of Rhode Island. So apparently the government does not like to own northern territory, but they like that Midwest stuff. Well, Alaska, they own 61% of that. So that just blew my mind, really. I got off on that little tangent about the federal government has all this bureaucracy, and they, they make up these uh, committees and these organizations and all these things to make the what's the, oops, wrong show. What were you thinking? It was the Cheech and Chong hour? You're wanting to burn it all? Is that what you thought it was? This is the Minutes with Mylo, man. This ain't the Cheech and Chong hour. So, yeah, that just kind of blew me away. How much they owned. So here's the United States Federal Abandoned Shipwreck Act. Okay. Passing the law in 1988 meant to protect historic shipwrecks in U.S. waters from treasure hunters and authorized salvagers by transferring the title of the wreck to the U.S. state whose water it lies in. So that's what I was talking about. If it was, I think it's 3 nautical miles off the coast, then it belongs to the state, like that South Carolina example. The Supreme Court upheld the Abandoned Shipwreck Act's constitutionality in 1998. In the U.S., the finder of a ship not abandoned could seek a salvage award. The countries of England, Wales, and Northern Ireland claim gold and silver finds that are more than 300 years old for the Crown by the way of their Treasure Act of 1996. Any treasure found in these nations must be reported within 14 days of uncovering it. So, I guess they switched gears there. And if you're in England or Wales or Northern Ireland, if you find gold and silver more than 300 years old, it belongs to the government. You can't do anything with it. The United States awards ownership to the landowner. If finds occur on federal land and it cannot be considered a federal offense, most of the United States prosecutes the unearthing of burial grounds. Well, of course they do. Okay? So, anyway, I talked about that. Yeah, Area 51's there in Nevada. I'd like to know, I didn't look up how many acres that might be, but, I mean, can you imagine, what are they doing with 79% of the whole state? I mean, if you were a governor of Nevada, you'd look and say, oh, look at my whole state, look how big this thing is, and then they go, well, excuse me, governor, but, 79% of your state belongs to the federal government, and he probably doesn't have that much control over it, which would be crazy. It'd be crazy. Here's the little tidbit at the bottom. This is what kind of irks me. Treasure hunting, and they're lumping everything. Remember I talked about one of those things in my series on hobbies was geocaching. Okay? Geocaching is make-believe treasure hunting. Okay? So it's something that it's just a thing. It could just be this bottle top, like I said, and I take this and I don't lose it. It doesn't get stolen from me. Somebody's going to cash it in for money. I intentionally take it and I put it under a rock and I mark the spot so it's easier to find. And then I tell people, hey, go find it, and there's the clues to it. Okay? That's not treasure hunting. That's like hide and go seek. Okay? But anyway, the reason I talk about that in this article, and I'll call it an article because Wikipedia is, a lot of that. There's truth and there's non-truths and there's probably some opinions and all that stuff mixed in with there. But it talks about here, treasure hunting can also refer to geocaching, a sport in which participants use GPS units to find hidden caches of toys or trinkets, or various other treasure hunting games. It's a game. It's not like I'm going out there and I'm trying to find, pre-Civil War artifacts or items or things that the Pilgrims brought over. I mean, if you're somewhere around Plymouth Rock, everything was pilgrims, pilgrims, pilgrims. So anyway, geocaching to me is not truly treasure hunting. Recreational metal detecting to me is not really treasure hunting. It's discovering things. Okay, but the criticism, treasure hunting is condemned by a growing number of nations, and the nations come up with the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and it's a specialized agency of the United Nations, the UN, aimed at promoting world peace, of course, world peace, and security through international cooperation in education, arts, science, culture. It has 193 member states. I don't know if that's countries, whatever, and 12 associate members. Well, they got to stick their nose and toes and everything, and so anyway. It mentions in here, if you watch my series on metal detecting, I talked about there was a series that they went out there and they followed these professional metal detectors, and they went around with archaeologists. I mean, these people found things with permission that were cataloged and documented and uncovered and did all this stuff. And it was pretty much, I'm sure there was a lot of production into it, but I think legitimately they went out and they got permission to, metal detect certain properties that they were almost assured to find pretty good items, pretty good artifacts, pretty good things. So anyway, but this article mentions it here that in 2013, that's how old it was, that was 10 years ago, this is put on the National Geographic Channel, set off a firestorm of controversy with the reality show Diggers. I'm pretty sure that was the same show that I watched. Professional archaeologists from the Society for Historical Archaeology, the largest scholarly group concerned with the archaeology of the modern world, roundly criticized the network for promoting the theft of cultural materials on public and private lands. So, I don't know how to explain it other than I believe the Society for Historical Archaeology got their feelings hurt that there was dudes with modern equipment going out and finding these artifacts, I wish I could remember some of the places they went, but they did go in places where, they were surely to find older things from the Pilgrims or things from, when the Declaration of Independence was getting signed, or the Civil War, things like that. So I mean, they had an idea of where they were going, and they went with, as far as I know, a crew of people, and some of them were archaeologists that and they said this in the show, otherwise I wouldn't know it. And they just got this Society for Historical Archaeology got butthurt, I think. They went out there and brought it to the masses and said, hey, look at all this stuff that's just buried, 6, 8, 10 inches under the ground. And I guess one of my arguments is you'd never know it was there. And I would love to talk to somebody that said, oh, well, it should just be, sacred. It should just be left alone. That historical value should just be left alone there. Well, how can you know that something's valuable, or that it's even, noteworthy historically, and you don't even know it's in the ground? You don't even know it's there until somebody comes along and says, hey, there's something, metal down there. Let's see what it is. And then they dig it up, and oh well, it's a belt buckle from the Pilgrim's days, or it's a shoe buckle from the Pilgrim's days. And then they get all butthurt. It's like, oh, you shouldn't dig that up. Oh, that's historical significance. You're going to be put in jail for digging that up. You didn't even know it was the frick it was there, right? And I guess that's my argument. Not whether it goes into a museum or whether it goes into a private collection, but if you have permission to dig the land and you dig up the pen that was used, the quill that was used to sign the Declaration of Independence, and it's in a gold box, hell, if you come up with, the Ark of the Covenant, if it's on private land and you had the right to dig it, I don't know. So be it. You'd never know it was there if somebody didn't come along, and it's not so much, I guess, who owns it. It's just the fact that, you start getting all tore up that, oh, you shouldn't even dig that stuff. You should leave it alone. Why? Nobody can benefit from it laying and rotting in the ground and rusting. So, but I think if you dig it and you spend the money and the effort, right, and you go through all the hoops, then you ought to be able to keep it. Private collection. If you want to turn it over to a museum, fine, you could do that. But I don't see where a museum could come along and, through, government legalities and political pressures, take things and say that ought to be, tucked away in a museum somewhere. And a case in point on that, and I just discovered this, of course, I may have mentioned this on one of the other shows about, hobbies, but the Alaskan bone find that they have, the largest private landowner in Alaska has come across all these tusks and bones and things from animals that shouldn't have been in Alaska. They're just falling out of this hillside, and he's using water to wash away the permafrost and all this and reveal all these bones and things. But he owns the land, and it's not archaeology because it deals with animals. There's no human remains. So he's got all these bones to animals, tusks of, woolly mammoths, shards of tusks, full tusks, and he owns it. It's his land. He bought a company years ago that was one of the biggest landowners in Alaska, private landowners in Alaska, and now he just outright owns this place, right? And I've told this story a couple of times, and I can't remember if it was on the video or not on my show. But anyway, he revealed on Joe Rogan Experience, the podcast, that back in the 50s, a lot of the bones were sent by the former company to be cataloged and put in a museum somewhere, and they went to New York, and they had so many bones that the museum that they were supposed to be stored at dumped them in the East River. And then he revealed on live on the podcast where they were, and now there's people out there diving to try to find these bones in the East River. And he had the street where certain street met the river and all this other kind of stuff. So there's actually, I started following on Instagram, and they there's a people actually trying to find the bones and see if they're even there. I mean, it's down on paper, and he still owns them. The company still owns them. They were just going to the museum to be cataloged and researched, and they had too many of them, and they dumped them in the East River. Or they gave them to somebody. the museum sold them something. So anyway, let me see if I can find out that name. I'm probably saying it wrong because I haven't looked at any of the posts lately. The Boneyard. There we go. It's called the Boneyard. You can look it up on YouTube. Like I said, Instagram. I think they've even got the Facebook. But anyway, let's see. I know, 45 minutes. I know. Hold on. Let me do this real quick. Can you see this? This is off the Instagram. This guy here. I'll make that bigger. This lady, one of his daughters, makes jewelry out of these bones and stuff. Let me see if I can go back. One more. Okay, this guy is carrying woolly mammoth tusks. And you see this water in a creek that he's walking in? This is part of a natural creek, but yet they take a water cannon and shoot into the muck and the permafrost and stuff, and it washes all this out. And then they just go and they collect it and they pick it up off the ground. But she makes jewelry out of these things. So anyway, but it's on private land. He owns it. It's not human. It's all animal, and therefore it's not archaeological, and totally different. Even he says on the interview on the podcast, totally different. You're talking about coming across treasure on your property. These bones. I know I'd heard it before, but they have found, not this guy, but in Alaska, fully frozen woolly mammoths, the whole carcass, the whole beast, the whole just like frozen. Anyway, that's interesting. Maybe there'll be another story, show and tell. How did they get there? What was the big catastrophe that killed them all? That kind of stuff. Anyway, I appreciate you guys checking in. If there's anybody just lurking in the background, I appreciate you coming and lurking. If you watch it on YouTube, like the channel, subscribe to the channel. Make me and the YouTube happy. Send me comments, all that. You have ideas for the show, I got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, if you know anything about that. I didn't know about Snapchat. I think I'm going to get rid of that. That's garbage. But anyway, that's my opinion. It's garbage. I can have one because I'm sitting on the other thing everybody has. And so, anyway, appreciate you. And stay up and ready. Probably Thursday night. Got another show going. But anyway, thanks everybody. Where's my camera? There it is.